Pune, a city pulsing with life, bore witness to a tragedy that shook its core. On a warm May night, the city's streets, usually buzzing with activity, fell silent, shrouded in the aftermath of a horrific car crash. A group of young friends, their laughter echoing through the streets just moments before, lay scattered, their lives snuffed out in an instant. A night of celebration had morphed into a scene of unimaginable devastation. Among the victims were promising students, their dreams shattered, their futures forever stilled. Parents who had waved goodbye to their children, their hearts brimming with hope, were left grappling with the agonizing reality of their loss. The city mourned, united in grief, yet grappling with the searing injustice of it all. This was not just an accident, it was a tragedy waiting to happen. The circumstances surrounding the crash painted a chilling picture of recklessness and disregard for the law. The luxury SUV involved, a symbol of affluence and extravagance, was unregistered, a glaring violation overlooked, perhaps even ignored, due to the driver's influential background. Behind the wheel, a minor, emboldened by a sense of invincibility that often accompanies privilege, sped through the city streets, pushing the limits of both the vehicle and the law. Adding fuel to the fire was the role of a prominent club, known to be a haven for the city's elite. Allegedly, the club served alcohol to the underage group, further fueling their reckless abandon. Witnesses whispered of lax security and a culture that prioritized the comfort and anonymity of its affluent clientele over the safety of its patrons and the community at large. The crash wasn't a mere accident, it was a culmination of a series of irresponsible choices, each one made possible by a system that too often favored the privileged few. The unregistered vehicle, the underage driving, the club's negligence. Each element pointed to a blatant disregard for the law, a disregard nurtured by a belief that consequences were meant for others, not for them. The tragedy, therefore, was not a freak incident, but a predictable outcome of a system that allowed such recklessness to thrive. The fact that the vehicle involved was unregistered wasn't just a technicality, it was a symptom of a deeper malaise. It spoke volumes about a system where rules were pliable, bent and broken to accommodate those with influence and connections. Was the unregistered status a mere oversight, or did it hint at a web of influence and corruption that shielded the privileged from scrutiny? The question hung heavy in the air as citizens drew parallels to countless other cases, where similar violations by the less privileged were met with swift and often brutal consequences. The disparity was stark, a glaring reminder of the two-tiered justice system that existed, one for the haves and another for the have-nots. The unregistered vehicle became a potent symbol, a tangible representation of the invisible shield of privilege that allowed some to operate outside the bounds of the law. It fueled public outrage, sparking debates about accountability and the urgent need for transparency and equality in the eyes of the law. The victims' families, their grief compounded by a sense of injustice, vowed to fight to ensure that their children's deaths were not just another statistic, another instance of privilege trampling over justice. The tragedy also shone a harsh light on the role of law enforcement. Had the police been vigilant? Had they clamped down on the blatant disregard for traffic regulations? Could this tragedy have been averted? Questions swirled around the conduct of the police, with accusations of negligence and corruption flying thick and fast. Witnesses came forward with accounts of a culture of impunity, alleging that the police were known to turn a blind eye to traffic violations, particularly those involving luxury cars and influential individuals. The whispers of bribes and favors exchanged further eroded public trust, fueling the perception of a police force beholden to the powerful rather than the law. The public demanded accountability, calling for a thorough and impartial investigation into the conduct of the police officers on duty that night. The families of the victims, their voices raw with grief and anger, demanded answers, seeking to understand how those sworn to protect had failed so spectacularly. The tragedy laid bare the cracks in the system, exposing a law enforcement apparatus that was often more concerned with maintaining the status quo than ensuring the safety and security of all citizens. Section 5. Whispers and Cries. the fight for justice. In the wake of the tragedy, a wave of grief and anger swept through Pune. The victims' families, shattered and broken, vowed to seek justice for their loved ones. They refused to let their children's deaths be dismissed as just another accident, another instance of youthful indiscretion. Their grief morphed into a steely determination to hold those responsible accountable, to fight for a system that valued all lives equally. Their fight was bolstered by a groundswell of public support. Students, activists, and ordinary citizens, outraged by the blatant injustice, took to the streets, demanding accountability and transparency. Candlelight vigils were held, social media platforms buzzed with calls for justice, and the city united in a chorus of condemnation against the culture of impunity that had claimed the lives of their own. The families, however, faced an uphill battle. Rumors of powerful forces at play, whispers of witnesses being intimidated, and the slow grind of the legal system threatened to derail their pursuit of justice. Yet, they persevered, fueled by grief, anger, and an unshakable belief that their children deserved better, that this city deserved better. Section 6. Privilege on Trial, a familiar tale. The tragedy in Pune was not an isolated incident. Across India, similar tragedies had played out with alarming regularity. From the streets of Delhi to the bustling thoroughfares of Mumbai, the names and faces of the victims may have differed, but the underlying narrative remained the same: a toxic cocktail of privilege, negligence, and a system that privileged the few over the many. The case of Salman Khan, a Bollywood superstar, convicted in a hit-and-run case, loomed large in the public consciousness. Despite overwhelming evidence, Khan's wealth and influence had allowed him to navigate the legal system for years, delaying justice and further entrenching the belief that the wealthy and powerful were above the law. The Pune crash, like these previous cases, became a flashpoint, igniting a national conversation about the urgent need for judicial reform. Citizens demanded an end to the culture of impunity, calling for a justice system that was blind to wealth, power, and social standing. The families of the Pune victims, their voices amplified by a chorus of outrage, became symbols of a nation yearning for change, for a future where justice was a right, not a privilege. Section 7. Scars on the Soul, the Unending Aftermath. The impact of the tragedy extended far beyond the families directly affected. It left an indelible scar on the city's psyche, casting a long shadow over Pune. Parents grappled with a newfound fear, their anxieties heightened every time their children stepped out of the house. The sense of security, once taken for granted, had been shattered, replaced by a gnawing unease. The incident served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, of how easily dreams could be extinguished by the recklessness of others. The city, once known for its vibrancy, seemed to retreat into itself, the carefree spirit dampened by a collective grief. The tragedy had exposed the fault lines in society, the deep-rooted inequalities and the systemic failures that allowed such incidents to occur. It forced a conversation, uncomfortable yet necessary, about privilege, accountability, and the very fabric of justice. Section 8. A Call for Change, Towards an Equitable Tomorrow. The tragic accident in Pune was not just a news story, it was a wake-up call. It served as a stark reminder that justice delayed is justice denied, that the lives of all citizens, regardless of their socio-economic background, deserve equal protection under the law. The incident ignited a flame, a collective desire for change, a yearning for a society where privilege did not guarantee immunity. The fight for justice for the victims is far from over. It demands systemic changes, a complete overhaul of a system that has for too long favored the privileged few. It calls for stricter law enforcement, greater accountability within the police force, and a judiciary that is truly blind to power and influence. The road ahead is long and arduous, but the pursuit of justice must continue unabated. The memory of those lost, their dreams cut short, must serve as a constant reminder of the urgent need for change. Only then can Pune and indeed India move towards a future where justice prevails and all lives are valued equally.